Hey, what's going on? It's Dr. Mike T. Nelson here. Welcome back to the Flex Diet Podcast. And today we've got something a little bit out of the ordinary. Vast majority of the time it's myself talking or interviewing researchers and experts in all things related to performance and body comp, how to do that without destroying your health. Today is a similar in those lines of trying to be the best that you can. And I decided to record an episode with my buddy Marcos from New York City here about my experience doing some plant medicine down in Costa Rica this past January. So myself and my wife went down there with a group of people, and we did ayahuasca, and we also did Kambo, or Kambo, however you want to pronounce it. I was debating about even releasing this as an episode or not, since one, it's a little bit off topic. So if you are not interested in those things and you want to skip this episode, no worries at all. And I decided to record it a while back, and I've opted to release it. I think it'll be hopefully interesting to you. We go through Marcos's experience with different compounds, and I talk about myself, my experience, and what sort of led up to it, and background. Hopefully maybe a few between the two of us, some words of wisdom, I guess you could say. And the main reason I decided to release this too was some of these substances will hopefully be changed in a classification in the next few years. MAPS has done a lot of great work. Shout out to Rick Doblin, looking at PTSD treatments using MDMA, so a different compound. Also looking at the use of psilocybin. And hopefully these compounds will find better and more therapeutical use in the future. They are on track for that. Granted, that's still a while away. But something Michael Pollan brought up in an interview is that the culture in the U.S. around any of these substances is probably going to lag behind for quite some time, just because we don't really have a lot of practice with them. So my hopes in releasing this is trying to spur more conversation about the culture and all the other aspects that go into it. And for myself, it was more of just a journey, something I started looking at over, probably 6 years ago now. I think the first person I ever heard talk about this was Mike Bledsoe. Had some conversations with him, and being the big geek that I am, dug into a lot of research that I could find, and spent many years just reading primary research. I didn't really read a lot of other stuff. I didn't read any trip reports per se. People had experiences, I would definitely talk to them about it, but I wanted more of a scientific perspective. And I didn't really plan on starting with ayahuasca. To me, that was kind of maybe a little further down the line, but circumstances lined up, and it was something that we were able to do. So, important disclaimer here. The information provided in this podcast is for general information purpose only, does not constitute the practice of medicine or other healthcare providing services, and does not include the giving of medical advice. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical recommendations, diagnosis, or treatment. And the use of this information on the podcast is at one's own discretion and should not be seen as an endorsement. Currently in the U.S., ayahuasca is a Scheduled 1 controlled substance. In terms of scheduling, that is the sort of the highest level. So there are legal ramifications related to that, and even just sourcing. So if you set aside the legal things, trying to get good material in the U.S. is going to be made much more difficult because it is a Scheduled 1 substance. Now, some areas have started decriminalization, which doesn't necessarily mean that it's legal. just means that law enforcement would not be their top priority in terms of local enforcement. But as of now, in this recording, these compounds are still illegal. If you go to other countries where that is different, for example, we were in Costa Rica, you may not necessarily have to worry about legality, but it is becoming more of a popular kind of tourist destination. So be very careful and definitely do your homework anytime there is an increase in popularity. Of course, like all things, there will be people who are seeking to sort of cash in on that and may not have your best interest in mind. Having gone through this experience, I can definitely see many ways in which it could go sideways very fast. So proceed with extreme caution. Again, if that is something that you decide to do, legality and ethics and everything else aside. As I mentioned, there are very legitimate risks, not only for safety, especially if you were on any other medications. As always, talk to your doctor or your physician and make sure that you tell them what you are doing, because there are real contraindications for it. So anyway, here is kind of my description of it, talking with my good buddy Marcos. We talk about his experiences with these compounds and then get into my experience with it. And this is brought to you by the Flex Diet Certification. If you want more information on 8 interventions for nutrition and recovery, these do not include ayahuasca, go to flexdiet.com. FLEXDIET.com, and you'll be able to get onto the wait list, and we will let you know the next time it is released. That'll also put you onto the free newsletter. So enjoy this chat with my good buddy Marcos. Hey, welcome back. And I'm here with my good buddy Mr. Marcos. How are you, sir?
What's up, Mike? How you doing? I'm good.
Good. Do you want to say where you're at and what you do if you want to potentially ever be found?
Yeah. I'm a New York-based personal trainer, whatever that means. I think I've said this before on other podcasts. I'm just some guy, man. I like helping people. I think at this point in my life, in September, it'll be 20 years that I'm training. Started when I was 40 in September, 7 weeks.
Nice.
And I find those spaces where I could help people or just holding space for people very gratifying for me. So no matter what people want to do, whether it's like gain weight, lose weight, it's more of a, transcendental connection that I make with people, as cheesy as that sounds. But if anyone that knows me and my clients, they know we have a very tight connection. And I think that really helps with like behavior change and then everything else externally that they want, like lifting weights and fitness. So, yeah.
Yeah. So you're looking at it much more as a whole person, not just some guy or gal who just comes in to lift with you.
No, I'm just gonna like tinker with your psychology a bit and see what we could upgrade and fix.
Yeah.
So I guess.
Awesome. And we first met at Dr. Ben House's place down in Costa Rica. Is it 4 years ago now? I lose track of time.
4.
Okay. And was that the Bro Week or were you at the other one first?
That was the Bro Week.
Okay. Yeah. That was a crazy time. Nobody died, so it was good.
Oh my! I almost died. Lexner almost died.
Yep. We had the incidents with a missing toe. You had a little. You want to talk about your waterfall incident?
Slip on the waterfall. I'm afraid of heights and deep water, so I figured, hey, I'm here with a whole bunch of my friends, so why not try to overcome 2 fears in one? Tried to jump off a ledge and slipped, and just fell face first into a whole bunch of wet rocks.
Yeah, and I was at top because I had been to that location before and seen people almost fall, and probably done a little too much EMT stuff. I used to do ski patrol for like 12 years, and all I kept thinking was, if something happens, how do we extract people out of there if something catastrophic happens and everyone's at the bottom? So I'm like, I think I'm just going to chill at the top. And then I saw you go and disappear. And I'm like, oh my God. I was like, oh shit.
He's dead. Because that's what everybody else thought.
Yeah. Because I couldn't see at the top. I could see you go off. I could see what happened, and then you just disappeared, and I was like, oh shit.
As I was tumbling, I was thinking, I was like, how the fuck am I gonna get out of here? I'm gonna ruin everyone's trip. Oh no, wake up, get up.
But you were okay. You got out on your own power. You healed.
I mean, Dave Roscoe came to save my ass, but yeah.
And you were one of the first people I had talked to about just even plant medicines and things of that nature. I had some other groups, like good friends of Mike Bledsoe and kind of people in those circles who had kind of talked about it. But you're like one of the first people I met in, I don't want to say more of the fitness circles, but that we just started talking about it when we were down there. And what I really liked is you're super supportive and very enthusiastic, but not like everybody needs to do this like now type person, which that really scares me.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too. I think a lot of the plant medicine, it's been like so over sensationalized. It loses a lot of its I think there should be a lot of respect and reverence around these substances. And all it takes is like one celebrity after another to just like sort of just like water it down, and it just turns into something else.
Yeah. Do you think, as I guess the popular, maybe not the best word, but as it's becoming more popular, is that something you worry about, or what are your kind of concerns about it?
Well, in terms of like resources, for sure. And you hear a lot of people like Hamilton Morris, Michael Pollan, Ferriss talk about it.
Yeah.
Where it's just, this is a very limited resource, and it's like something so sacred and special. It's like, for me, in my case, I thought I needed it to overcome certain things in my mind. I don't want to say traumas, but whatever people want to call it. And it was throughout my process getting there, the journey beforehand, where I really just, solved a lot of those issues by my own volition before the medicine. And that was pretty neat. And then when I drank the medicine the first 4 times, I didn't get shit. And by medicine specifically,
really?
Yeah. It wasn't until the 5th one where she just blew me off into like the 100th dimension, which was one of the more aggressive journeys I've had on ayahuasca. At this point now, I've drank like 3 dozen times.
Oh, wow.
I don't really, the number isn't important, but just giving you like, like the first anything. And out of all of those, I've had like a handful that have been just out of this world. The rest have been somewhat pleasant, more dreamlike. But so yeah, I think what's happening now is that people want this experience. And even now at the gym, I try not to roll my eyes, but trainers are like, oh, they meet a new client, or their clients are talking about mushrooms. They're like, you should go talk to Marcos. He knows all about that.
He's the mushroom man.
Oh my God, I went to this party last night and I was like so coked up. I did like chocolate mushrooms and it was crazy. And I'm just like,
oh,
I'm like, that's not how you do it, man. What do you mean?
Yeah.
I had a time. And it's like,
it's completely different based on set and setting, what your intention is,
sacrilege,
the dose.
For sure.
Yeah.
So Timothy Leary is the guy who came up with like set and setting, right? It was like set, it's my mindset. My mindset going down to Peru was like, I have these things that I want to make better within myself, improve, get rid of certain things, and just be happier with myself. So I had a mission. The setting, I went to this place called the Way-In in Huaraz, Peru, which is all the way up in the mountains. Really awesome, like just mythical place. And that in itself is like so magical and so special. And I've also drank at a yoga loft on top of a laser tag in Brooklyn. Just for the experience, which was exactly what I expected it to be. So that wasn't the right setting for me. But, when people are doing it just like casual, just to try it, I think that's very dangerous. It's not, I can't pick off grandmas off the street and be like, hey, lady, you want to go squat? See what it's all about? It just wouldn't be, it's not efficacious, I think, or safe.
Yeah.
Many times I've heard people having like weird, like psychotic episodes, and I'm never doing that again. And it's just dangerous, man. It's not, you got to have a real concrete goal, at least in my experience, from what I've seen from other practitioners and people who have tried it.
Do you think it's different going to another country because ayahuasca historically is not in New York City? You know what I mean? It's much more
So
different in
interesting.
terms of environment, kind of where it came from, or doesn't matter as long as you have a good set and setting.
So this is tough because probably the most powerful shaman that I've met is upstate, was upstate, and it was a very she's just incredible. She trained, she's Shipibo trained, which is part of the Peruvian tradition, and they run their shop very, very tight. Awesome place. It's just great. They really emphasize the diet, which is another big factor. And as far as I understand, as other places do, they somehow acquire Aya from certain places. As like with any other plant, it depends where I grow it, who's growing
Right.
it. A lot of those intentions in itself go into the medicine on how they mix it as well. There's many different vines, they add different things. So I equate it to like, okay, so you like to drink. Let's say you like Long Island iced tea. And we'll use this as an example because it has different ingredients in it. It's like 7 different alcohols. So now I could go up to the best 100 mixologists in the world. You're going to get 100 different Long Island iced teas, despite it being the same ingredients. So there's a lot that goes into that. Where you get it from, what vine, what's added, who's serving it, and what did you follow the diet? That's a big one. That's probably, to me, that's one of the biggest ones. I find that in going to Peru, for myself personally, I was supposed to do the diet 2 months out, and I started the diet 6 months out because I was so like hell bent on
Hmm.
doing this properly. For the first time in my life, I was actually going to commit to something 100% rather than half-assing everything as I normally do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that was super important. Whereas, there's, you could join groups on Facebook that are like, hey, Mike, just so you know, it's Friday, 5:55 my time. There's the ayahuasca ceremony tomorrow, 9 p.m. Join us, and you're just like, what?
Whoa.
It's not. I don't think that's. I don't want to say it's a waste because everyone's experience is very unique and their
Sure.
own. But I think with a more proper set, with a better mindset, I think people will definitely get more out of it. You know. So
And do you think why the first four times you didn't get much, was there something different on the fifth time, or just kind of
no,
the way it
I think
happens?
I think it was a pretty neat lesson for me in expectations.
Yeah.
I had been listening to a whole bunch of like Alan Watts lectures. I
Mm.
listen to that dude say anything, and it's just
Yeah. It makes everything sound amazing. You're like, whoa.
like him and Vincent Price. You remember when Vincent Price used to do the Scooby Doo specials?
Yeah.
Everything is very like, oh, hello, Michael, have
Yeah.
a glorious day. So, what's his face? Alan Watts would talk a lot about like Zen Buddhism. And at that point, I had like done DMT, some San Pedro before I did Aya. So I was a little bit, or at least I thought I was somewhat familiar with like what to expect. But it wasn't until the fifth one where she was like, dude, now that you're like, let me go, I got you. So that was a
So
good
you went
lesson.
back to the same place for
Except,
5 times in a row, is that right?
well, no, that time that I went there, I was there for 2 weeks. That was Thanksgiving of 2014 or 2015.
Okay.
Um, so there you drank 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 2 days off.
Oh, okay. So in a row,
I
kind of
did
back
there
to back.
for 2 weeks. And yeah, it was awesome. After I broke through, it was like, oh, okay. It was very extremely humbling, because I think that was part of the lesson. It's like letting go, acceptance, being patient, no expectations, and then just complete surrender. All
And what
cliche words
was,
that everyone hears, but
yeah. And what was so different about the fifth experience then, if you want to share it? I know sometimes people don't like sharing because it's a very personal thing.
no, I'm okay with it. It was the most immersive psychedelic experience that I had up to that point. where, oh, actually, something was different. I asked the shaman if I could play my own playlist. What happened was the first 4 ceremonies, I was in a yurt with other people, about a dozen people. And, you know, people are having like amazing experiences. Like day one, you know, some chick is like, oh my God, I saw my mom. I've never met my mom. She died.
Oh, wow.
She gave birth to me, like just crazy shit. And I'm over here like, oh, cool. I can't wait for tomorrow. It happened. And on the 5th day, I was just so upset. I was like, man, this is like horse shit. And Shama was like, hey man, you're like really like you just need to chill. You're like a little bit wound up tight. And I was like, all right, we'll do. He was like, we're gonna do a private ceremony. And I was like, is it cool if I play my own playlist? And on there, I had like a whole bunch of like different. I had some Clint Mansell on there, Hans Zimmer, and a whole bunch of other composers that I really enjoy. And after drinking just 1 cup, because all the other nights I was drinking 3 cups. After drinking 1 cup, as soon as I lay down, it was like I literally just felt like I got turned into like this like stardust, and I just blast off into outer space where everything is made out of gold. So it started with a scarab beetle just shooting across, and me following it into this weird journey of intertwining dimensions and whatnot.
Wow.
So that was pretty neat.
What was your takeaway from that?
You know, it left me with a I don't want to say scary, but an immense sense of wonder and awe. You know, the fact that I was like so insignificant yet significant.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm not shit, but I'm the center of my universe kind of thing. This weird like dichotomy of, you know, how important we are to our current reality, but in the grand scheme of things, we're just a piece and we're all the same piece. It was beautiful. It was, you know, as you know, a lot of these things are very indescribable.
Yes.
And you just try to hold on. It's like you get so many lessons, and you're just trying to like grab onto sand and just take what you can with you. But now that I've done it a few more times, that like sense of familiarity that comes with it is just awesome. And most of the times it feels safe. Other times you get kicked in the balls when your intentions aren't pure.
Can you, maybe control's not the best word, but feel like as you've done it more, you can kind of guide the experience a little bit more, or not so much?
No, because, you know, I also think because of our physiology, like, you know, and what we eat has a lot to do with it. If you're fasted, you know, so I could drink the same brew, fasted 3 days, nothing happens. I eat breakfast, even if it's a vegan breakfast, the next day. And, you know, even if you have like coffee or whatever, I feel like that changes the whole experience. So trying to control it is just, I think, a moot point, which is why I have so much respect for like proper guides and like shamans or anyone who's in that field, because it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. I don't know how you could drink a cup and then like guide, you know, 12 to 24 people while you're singing and playing icaros, like just, or instruments. It's mind blowing to me. I don't think I'll ever be at that level.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's a different level. Even meeting the shaman that we went and worked with, after having an experience, you're like, I was talking to a buddy of mine on the way back. We went and talked to her the next day, and we're both like, I would love to see how she sees the world, because it isn't how I see the world. You know what I mean? And it's just one of those things that's hard to describe. You know, it's just the things that she would say, the things that she picked up on, you know, the interactions. It was pretty crazy.
I think some people are really just born for that, to serve the medicine. And it's just, I think the word shaman is also losing its potency now, because it's like, you know, you meet a guy who's been to Burning Man 3 times,
right?
He has a hat and a feather and like 2 tattoos.
Shaman, bro.
It's like, shaman, come to my penthouse. I'll give you some ayahuasca. Which, hey, he may as well be like the most powerful dude on the planet, but chances are not really, you know. You go somewhere to like Colombia and it's like dudes over 100, you know, centurions serving medicine that are just like, hey man, I don't even know, like, is the best I can do. And you're like, okay, you just served 50 people.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if at that point it just becomes so consciously, or I should say unconsciously competent, right? It's like asking Michael Jordan to miss a free throw in his prime. It's like they know what they're doing, they can execute everything, but if you were to ask them to try to explain what they're doing, it's probably so subconscious at that point. I think it might be difficult.
I agree. So your journey.
Yeah, so it's a little bit of a longer story, but I ended up going down to Costa Rica in Nosoro. Went down with some other friends, and my wife Jody came with me, and she's fine with me talking about it. And it's one of those things I had looked into for quite a while, probably 5 or 6 years, spent reading. I'm a weirdo, so I didn't look at much of any of the trip reports or any of that kind of stuff. I just felt like for me that wasn't helpful. If someone had a story about it, I'd listen to their story. I thought it was super interesting. But to like random people I didn't know, like their experience, I just wasn't that interested because I didn't really know how it would benefit me. And I was afraid that if anything else, it may negatively bias me subconsciously. So I just didn't really read any of those. I read, go figure, primary literature, what's in it, how does it work, that kind of stuff, which doesn't really ever prepare you for an experience. But the biggest thing I wanted to know is, based on the actual literature, what are the risks? How do you mitigate the risks? What are the potential upsides? And I'd read about, LSD and psilocybin and stuff because some of David Nutt's work and, Imperial College of London, where they, dosed people and stuck them in an MRI, and you see like massive changes to areas of the brain, like the default mode network and like stuff we had no idea was really going on before. So to me, just as something to understand neuroscience is super fascinating as a research tool also. So did that, and kind of the plan in my head was, at some point when the time is right, maybe start with a small dose of psilocybin of mushrooms and kind of gradually go up for from there. And I wasn't in any huge hurry to do any of it per se. They'd use cannabis, but still pretty mild compared to a lot of people, especially with edibles. Like the highest dose of an edible I've ever had is like 15 milligrams, which to some people is like nothing. And we had the opportunity came up. Some friends of ours are going down to Costa Rica. We had a business meeting down there. And so like, hey, you can stay after for another day. We all did it last year. We went to this place and I kind of checked it out. And I was like, okay. And the people in the group are very analytical, very precise, especially what they were doing and based on some of their past careers. One of the guys being in high level tier 1 operator in the military. So I'm like, okay, if they're okay with it, they've already did it, and they're inviting us as an option to come back, wasn't required, then okay, that's a pretty good stamp of approval, right? If something went bad or you didn't really trust anyone, you sure as hell are not going to invite your other good friends you're doing a business project with to come down and be like, hey, let's go do this thing. But even then I was just like, man, I don't know. Like I didn't want to start with ayahuasca. That to me was still pretty freaky, just based on the handful of experiences I've heard from people. And so Jody and I talked about it, and the more I thought about it, like the only reason I wouldn't do it at this point was I don't know what I would find, right? There's always that nervousness of like, what will you learn? Maybe it's something bad. And the more I studied, I'm like, well, it isn't really ever a bad trip per se. There's unsafe trips, and there's a lot of shit that can go sideways, especially after having done it. Oh boy, there's a lot of shit that can go sideways. I'm like, okay. So we talked about it and I was like, yeah, let's, I also think about if I flash forward into the future, 4 months later, after everyone's done it, and I didn't do it, would I regret not doing it? Especially having had the opportunity there at that time. I'm like, yeah, I think I probably would have regretted it, So I'm like, okay, so that's probably good info to do it. So when we get out there and we had done Kambo in the morning. So we're at this great place in Nosoro. It's actually Kambo Casita. And we go out there. We had all the group stayed at this opposite house, just overlooking the jungle. Beautiful place. And so they took 3 or 4 people at a time to do a Kambo. And so we didn't really I didn't know much about Kambo at all. I asked the facilitator. They're like, well, we recommend you do Kambo in the morning and then do the ayahuasca ceremony in the evening. So I'm
Mhm.
like, okay, whatever you recommend, that sounds good. The people are like, yeah, we did it last year. It was good. I'm like, okay. So yeah, here's your money. Sign up, walk over there. And even then, I was still in my head. I told Jody, I'm like, if I walk in and the shaman is there for the Kambo ceremony, which she was,
Mhm.
and every fiber of my body is like, nope, this is a horrible idea. I'm like, here's all my money. I'm out.
Yeah.
So like even up until that point, I was still like, if I'm not, feeling secure about this or, 100% sure that they have the best interest of the group in mind, then keep my money. I'm out. I can make more money. I'm not worried about it.
Mhm.
So we went in and she was super nice, super great. And Kambo, for people who don't know, is I don't know if it's really considered a poison, but it's a peptide secreted by a frog. And you burn like three holes, sometimes more, in the side of your arm. Typically, they can do it in other locations, and they apply this peptides in there, and you have a pretty strong reaction to it. When we got there, I didn't know anything about it. So we're getting ready, and there's a practitioner that sits next to you. The shaman comes over and she looks at each person and she's like, all right, take your shirt off. I'm like, all right. She pokes on my shoulder and she tells the apprentice who was there next to me, who was administering it, she's like, yep, closer to lymph nodes, mix strong. I'm like, oh, this, I don't know about this. This might be a bad idea. And so we're going through and doing it. They'd put in some eye drops, which I don't know if you've ever had those before.
Oh, you did
They,
Sananga.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, cool. I have not done that.
It burns like hell. It's like eye drops that burn like hell. You're supposed to help with vision and I don't know what all, but I'm like, okay, sure, whatever. I'm just like,
Oh,
I'm whatever you think is best, I'm in. And then they did rape, which is a
oh my
type of
God. You
tobacco.
did the
Yeah, like up your
triple threat,
nose.
man. Yeah, I've done that. That is not fun.
That was intense. And this is before the Kambo. So they give you the eye drops, you're sitting out, you're looking over the jungle. They do the rape. I can't remember which order it was in. And all of a sudden, this tobacco goes up your nose. And they're like, okay, don't inhale it. Just let it hang out there. And you feel like this immense burning. Your eyes are watering. It felt like someone stuck my head in a vice and was just like trying to close it for about 5 or 8 minutes. And while this is going on, the two other people had started just a little bit ahead of me. I look up and the guy in front of me all of a sudden just turns white and just passes straight out. I mean, he was sitting down, he's on a bed,
Mhm.
nothing bad happened to him. And then all of a sudden I see the guy to the left of me. This is right before they do the burn for the Kambo on me. And he starts looking funny and he sort of, crawls over to his side. And the apprentice who's next to me, she's like, okay, when we do this coming up right now, just don't pass out. I don't want you to pass out because she's getting nervous. These people are just, in there dropping like flies. So they, burn the three little holes in your arm and they stick it in basically the burn hole.
Mhm.
And it's fascinating because because in my brain, I'm thinking about, oh, why are they doing this? Why are they burning your skin? But the more I thought about it, I'm like, it's actually kind of, I wouldn't say perfect, but a brilliant delivery system.
Yes.
Right. So now you've got 3 entry points. You're going literally right into the bloodstream. It's very fast acting as you've had it done. And initially, you just feel this warm sensation coming up. And then all I felt was this super intense pressure. Like I could feel warm. I looked down, all my skin was turning red. I just feel this sensation coming all the way up. And they keep going. And she's like, okay, just let me know. Don't pass out. And I remember seeing, I'm like, okay, the world is about the size of a pinhole right now. A couple minutes later, and she's like, okay, that's enough. And then literally, as soon as they wiped it off, like everything like started reversing almost like instantly.
Did you purge?
I didn't. The two other guys did. So they also give you this papaya juice to drink, and there's some other things that go on. And I didn't feel nauseous like at all, which is crazy because the guy in front of me threw up. The guy next to me threw up. The shaman goes over to the guy next to me and she looks and he goes, parasites. He's like, what? He's like, oh, you have parasites. And she's pointing to this stuff he had thrown up in the
Mhm.
bowl. I think why they do Kambo is that initially people will purge, they would throw up during the Kambo ceremony, so they probably don't as much in the evening. I didn't have any of that, so I don't know if
It's
you did when
probably
you
so
had
pure.
your Kambo.
Oh, I threw up.
Yeah, which
I
is
threw
super
up.
common, I guess.
Yeah. Well, it just feels like volcano, and it's crazy because I've done a whole bunch of rape,
Oof.
and the last one that I did recently, which was with a Colombian shaman, was the wildest version I've ever done of it. I was doing it with my brother, and I see my brother going through it. It's his first time doing rape, and it's like at this point I've done it a shit ton of times, and I'm just like, ah man, whatever. Like you're just like
Yeah.
overreacting. Just breathe. You're fine. And I just see my brother's face just like swell, his eyes, just mucus coming out of every pore.
Oh.
He could barely breathe, and I'm like, dude, like relax. Shaman comes over, puts the pipe in my nose and just blows through it. I thought someone shot me in the head.
Yeah.
I was getting
Super
about.
intense.
I was like, holy shit! I was worse than my brother just off of one nostril.
Oof. Wow.
Uh, so yeah, I can't believe you did all three in a row. I'm so curious about Sananga.
It all happened in such fast succession. I can't really tell you what was different from each one, because it was all kind of part of the ceremony they did. But after we were hanging out at the house. So Jody had her experience, which she's like, yeah, and part of it I had to get up and use the bathroom. And so I went to use the bathroom and my face was all swollen. She's like, I looked like a frog. And they're like, oh yeah, that's just frog face. That happens.
Oh yeah,
Because you get like a reaction, you just get a lot of intense swelling from it. I'm like, I didn't have to use the bathroom. I think that would have freaked me out quite a bit. Yeah, so we went back and just hung out at the house. We were the last group to go through, and the ayahuasca ceremony was that night. And it wasn't anything to do in the house. I didn't bring my computer, didn't really bring my phone because I was like, well, it'll be a good time just to hang out with people. I guess I was more careful about what inputs I wanted to let in. I'm like, this will be a great time just to relax, to unplug. I'm not doing any client stuff. They know I'm off. The assistant coach is working with them. I'm not to be contacted. Nobody can get a hold of me anyway. And I'm like, I'll just probably journal a lot. I brought a book to read, maybe if I get really bored. And so I slept for a while, read. I had all these plans to like write all this stuff out in my head. I wrote nothing, which is very odd for me. Jody was super tired, so she slept almost the whole afternoon. She's like, I've never felt that calm in my life. It was so weird. And it's great because you're in a beautiful environment. You're hanging out at a house overlooking the jungle. And I thought that was super weird, right? And that kind of happened to everyone in the group. Like they were all super much more quiet and reserved, but not like spaced out or anything like that. Like everyone was still very present, but it didn't seem like the outside world was bothering people as much.
Everyone's focused for ceremony.
Right. And that could be part of it too, because a couple of people had done it the year before, a couple of people had not. So it was this mix of people who had done it and people who hadn't done it. Did you feel kind of weird and more clear after doing Kambo?
Definitely weird in the first part. Clearer. It probably took me like an hour for me to feel clear after.
Oh yeah, you feel miserable for a while. There's no doubt.
With the rapé, at least this last time that I did it, I think if anything, it was probably like too strong. I feel like it sort of like really sort of encroached on my Aya ceremony because this was like right before Aya. And
okay.
I was like super jittery.
Oh yeah.
I was like, Jesus. I was just like, wow. So
we just hung out at the house, and you're usually fasting by that point. So, you're like a little bit hungry, but I'm like, whatever. And so we go over in the evening for the ceremony, and we get in, and the shaman was there. And it was interesting to see just the different icons and stuff that they had. So what we did is a form of called daime. So daime is from Brazil. It's I guess maybe church isn't really the right word, but it's a religion down there. And one of the things I was super concerned about is what you had mentioned. you go to different places, they may put something extra in the ayahuasca. It may be from a different vine. They may brew it differently. And I kept thinking in my head, I'm like, okay, so if all these crazy tourists are coming down for this, and I'm some unscrupulous person, and they're all expecting this expectation, right? Everyone wants to feel like they got their money's worth.
Yes.
And part of the culture around it is people purge and people throw up. So I had heard stories of people putting, tobacco and other things in ayahuasca to make sure people purge and make sure they get their quote unquote money's worth. And so that kind of worried me a little bit. I'm like, I don't know if I want to have other stuff in there. So this particular branch, they just use quote unquote pure ayahuasca, which isn't really anything per se, but they don't really add any other additives. And that's where they get it from. It's cooked for like 7 days and all this whole process that goes with it. And I felt better knowing that, okay, at least it's coming from a legit source. I'm in another country. It's not illegal down there. I don't have to worry about some shady character trying to import God knows what, like across the border and all that kind of stuff. And we get there and there's just, symbols of like Jesus on the cross. There's this crazy looking frog, just all sorts of different symbols. There was a Buddha. And I remember as the ceremony was starting, looking at this frog and thinking, don't stare at the frog. You're going to have like dreams of like crazy frogs coming after you and stuff. So I was like trying not to look at the frog per se, because I was like paranoid for some reason there's going to be frogs in my dreams. So the place was set up interesting. It was super small. There was maybe only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people that did it. They had like at least 5 or 6 other assistants they call guardians. At first I was like, why do you need so many people for this? And as she's setting stuff up, this is how much I know, right? And as she's setting stuff up, she's like, okay, you 2 guys over here kind of by this door. And it's this open air complex with a pool, and it just faces the jungle. So there's no, other than the main door, which is on the other side, unless you're scaling up a jungle foot wall, no one's coming in from the other side. But it was nice that it was very open. Like you felt like you were kind of sort of in nature, but kind of not. And there's 2 other people on the other side, Jody and another person were there. And as she's setting stuff up, she's telling the guardian, she's like, okay, you watch this right side. And she had stacked most of the people on the right side. And she had everyone on the right side except for one other person on the other side. And I'm on the right side. And there was this guy, Rob, who was right by this kind of open air doorway. And I asked him, I said, what's your job? He's like, I kneel here and I protect the space. And he was very serious, like super nice dude, but he had this kind of serious look on his face. Like he meant business. And I'm like, that's kind of weird. Like, who the hell is going to scale through a jungle and come in the middle of the night? And I thought it was kind of weird, but I'm like, whatever, they're doing their thing. So they start the ceremony and we pick up little cards. We read the card and it's like communion almost. So the first person goes up, first person from our group goes up, she gets ayahuasca, drinks it, sits back down. Next person goes up. So we each go up in succession, one after the other. And they're playing music. They're, having all sorts of stuff going on. And then all of a sudden the first person just starts crying and just sobbing. Yeah. At this point, I'm still, kneeling, and she's kind of going through stuff. And then all of a sudden the next person, she starts losing her shit. And then all of a sudden we hear the third person go, and I'm sitting here going, uh-oh. It's like being on the ocean, seeing the tidal wave coming in. And I know about how much time was separated from when they got, their first dose. And there's a guy to the right of me, and I'm thinking, oh shit, here it comes. Okay, just breathe. It's going to be fine. It'll be cool. Everything is safe. Don't worry about it. The guy next to me is like super quiet. Nothing happens. So all of a sudden, an hour later, I'm like, I don't know. I don't feel anything at all. Like the whole left side of the room is like super quiet. And, go up. She's like, do you want another cup? I'm like, sure, whatever. I don't know. You tell me. Like, I'm here. You guide me. She's like, sure. Gives me another cup. I'm like, great. And the second person just all of a sudden, have you ever heard the sound of someone choking on their own vomit? That was the sound that she made, which if anyone's heard that, your first thought is like, oh, it definitely very fearful. It's like the only time in the whole ceremony I was like really freaked out. And so everyone is on her like instantly, and the shaman is holding her, and she's going, come back to your body, come back to your body. And the guy next to me is an EMT. He stands up and stops like halfway. I'm going, there's people there helping her. I don't know what's going on. They got it under control. I'm not messing with the ceremony. And that was like the only time I was like super nervous. And she's just going through just a lot of shit. I'm like, oh, man.
Common, man. I've seen some shit, boy.
Yeah, like yelling, shrieking.
It's almost like an exorcism.
That's what, if you didn't know anything, you would swear that's what you were seeing, right? For some people. And I was like, oh, man. And so the person next to her, she hear her start sobbing. And she comes around again. This is like right before I got my second dose. The guy next to me is like super quiet. He had, laid back down after this event. She goes up and she goes, how are you doing? He's like, she's like, do you want a second dose? And he's been like super quiet this whole time. He's like, no. I'm like, okay, I guess he's going through some shit too. But it was interesting to see how some people were very outward, vocally crying. I don't want to say loud, but other people like him were super internal. Like he wasn't even making a peep, but he was obviously, going through some stuff. This goes on for a while. They're, playing a bunch of tunes, and she comes by. She goes, how you doing? I'm like, yeah, I'm still kneeling at this point. Everyone's lying down. I'm just like, she's like, really? I'm like, yeah. She's like, here, have another glass. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever. So I have a third glass. And I'm watching everyone just lose their shit, as it's going on. And like a half hour after the third glass, I'm thinking, similar to you, I'm like, okay. So I came all the way down here to have whatever experience this is. And maybe my experience is that I don't get an experience. Like maybe that's what this is teaching me, that's part of the drill. And then after that, I was like, oh, but I actually got to witness everything that happened to everyone, because a lot of the people were completely out of it. They sure didn't know anything that was happening to anyone else in the room. I got to see people, sit down, stand up, move around, walk around, how many times they went to the bathroom. And I was like, okay, so maybe that's the deal. Maybe that's my takeaway, is that I get to witness all these other people like kind of working through stuff. I was like, okay, that's pretty cool. She comes by again. She's like, anything going on? I'm like, and I said, no, not really. I said, I feel a little funny, but like nothing. She's like, really? Nothing? I'm like, no. She's like, okay. Comes back with a fourth glass. And I'm like, okay, whatever. I'm following your lead. Like, cool. All right. And so at this point, I'm like, okay, maybe I need to lay down. Maybe I just need to close my eyes. Maybe I'm just trying too hard, because all the other people were like upright and they laid down and just started sobbing, And I'm like, okay. So I'm laying down. This is like 45 minutes into it. Comes by again. She's like, how you doing? I'm like, like I feel something, but not much. She's like, no visions? And I'm like, no visions. She's like, no visions. And I'm like, no. And she's like, ugh. And she goes off, comes back with a fifth glass. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
How big are glasses?
Huh?
How big are the cups?
They're like, average sized. I don't know. They look, normal sized. And I'm like, okay. And I remember I'm kneeling. I remember taking the cup. And as I finished drinking it, it wasn't even like all the way done. All I hear is a picture of her face. And she goes, interesting. And like the whole world, like just disappeared like below me. Like it felt like you were sitting on a dock that just disintegrated and you dropped through the earth somehow.
5 fucking cups for your first time.
Yeah. And I woke up on a beach in South Padre with Jody drinking coffee, and we were hanging out kiteboarding. And there's this little voice that goes, this is it. I was like, what? Like, this is it. I'm like, what do you mean this is it? Oh, this is what I was searching for, right? Because I didn't know what to expect. Like one of the questions I had is like, am I on the right path? Am I doing what I'm supposed to be doing? Do I have any sort of weird trauma in the past that I should be dealing with that I just maybe don't even know about?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, cool. And the voice, or, it sounds like a voice, is like, no, this is it. And I was like, oh, okay. That's pretty cool. And then literally I got stuck in the present day. Like if you ever watch an old school VHS, like tape recorder that got stuck on a loop, it was the weirdest thing where I sort of knew what was going on in the room. I could see people move. I could see people get up, but then it would just loop. It would just loop over and over and over and over. Like the same things just kept happening. And once in a while, I would get like a little vision like that. And then just like being stuck in a room. And it wasn't like, people have had like nights where like you can't sleep, and you're awake. And it was literally like 4 years of just being stuck in what felt like the present day.
Yeah, because time doesn't exist in that space.
No. And
you have
it's
no
so hard
idea
to explain that to people who haven't felt it. And all I kept thinking was the sun will come up at some point. Just chill, just breathe. The sun will come up at some point. And eventually it did, but it felt like 4 years. And I was thinking about it, and I was like, it was almost like, oh, here's your lesson, dumbass. You're okay. You're supposed to be more present. And I'm going to give you 4 years to practice like being more present.
I like that. That's a great takeaway.
Yeah. And weird stuff happens like during the ceremony. I remember once someone gave us advice beforehand. She's like, and if you have to use the bathroom, get up and use the bathroom. And I'm like, what the hell kind of advice is this? That's like the dumbest advice I've ever heard. And I remember lying there after like right before my 5th glass going, I kind of have to use the bathroom. I should use the bathroom. I don't know if I really need to use the bathroom or not, but I think I do. And this feels like it goes on forever, right? It's probably like a few seconds. And I'm like, oh yeah, she said, if I need to use the bathroom, I should get up and use the bathroom. So get up, and one of the other guardians was this shorter person. And by this point, I could, kind of feel it. I hadn't stood up the whole time. So I don't know how my motor skills are. I felt a little funky, and I get up a little wobbly. And one of the guardians who was helping, you could see the look of like fear on her face, thinking I was just going to just pull over and just, tumble her into the floor. Mm-hmm. So she helps me get to the bathroom. I get in, and it's a weirdest sensation to know you're definitely under the influence of something, but you can still walk around and move. Yeah. That part was weird. And I remember standing there taking a whiz going, this is the best whiz of my entire life. This is just like pure relief.
It's so funny because so many times people tell me like, I don't want to do that. Or I don't think it's for me because I'm going to lose my mind or I'm going to shit myself. And I'm like, yeah. First of all, at least in this one specific case, I'm like, I've seen you fucking drunk and
yeah,
you shit yourself then. This is way easier. If you've been drunk, you can, for the most part, control any psychedelic altered state of mind with the right amount, dosage, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've even, you'll do it a few more times maybe, and every time the whole bathroom debate is always like.
That's like a real thing, I guess.
But I don't want to miss out on the initial takeoff, so I'm going to stay here a little bit longer. And sometimes you just stay there forever because, you sort of fall into like this like lucid state where you just sort of fall back, like you said. It's like the floor disintegrates underneath you, and you just get blasted off into the 5th dimension. And different like reels play, different dimensions or whatever, different visions. And then you're out, you snap out of it, and you're like, oh shit, I gotta pee. Like, I gotta get out of here. It's very weird.
Yeah, and I remember also lying there, like probably right after I had the 4th glass or so, and hearing people just all of a sudden just, wah! Like, losing their shit. And I remember lying there. Normally you would think, oh my God, what's happening to that person? Like, oh, I'm so worried about them. And, of course, you have a lot of serotonin and other neurotransmitters that are being altered. I remember lying there going, yeah, that's right. You go, girl. You get those demons. Like, I'm so proud of you. I'm like so happy for all of you because that everybody did it they volunteered. They did it out of their own free will. No one was forcing them to do it. And, a couple of people, they were like really, really nervous. One person tried to rebook her flight out the day before because she didn't want to do it. And so it was interesting of the sensation of just feeling like I'm just sending them love and making sure they're good. I know they're safe. And I'm just so happy. I'm so grateful that they're doing this for themselves. And yeah, that was a super interesting thing. And I just kept thinking, I'm like, wow, that's so cool that I get to hear what other people are going through, that I get to kind of be a little bit of a witness to things happening.
which is cool because what happens is a lot of times you're in the guide that was next to you that was kneeling that said, I have to protect the space. You think of it as a container, right? Like as a
Yeah.
force field. And what he's protecting it from is like outside energies that may be coming in and or things, you know, that come out of you guys that are going off into the ethereal space or whatever. This all sounds very hocus pocus to people
Oh,
who
yeah.
have done it, but I swear to God, it's somewhat real. So
Yeah.
what
And for that
happens
guy,
next?
like during the ceremony, I also remember lying there going, I'm so glad that dude's there. I'm so stoked that he's there doing his thing. You know, where like before I'm like, what? I don't know. This is kind of weird, you know, but
What, man? What do we got? What do we got?
yeah.
Killer frogs coming after us?
Yeah.
But what ends up happening is it's almost like it's a very chaotic orchestra in the sense that you have all the guides, you have the shaman, you know, she's singing, or maybe some of her helpers are singing, while all
Yeah.
these other people are like trying to like corral and take care of everyone. At the same time, the people you're drinking with, the people that are under the influence of Aya, you know, you'll have maybe the whole room crying, just sobbing, and it's the most painful, heartfelt, like deepest
Oh,
sobs
yeah.
ever. And then that influences everyone else's ceremony, just the
Yes.
power of sound. It's super, you know, sad. Someone laughs, everyone starts laughing. It's the weirdest sort of like ebb and flow of noise and sound that really influences what you're going through.
Oh, 100%. And I remember lying there also going, I'm so glad I'm not here with a bunch of dickheads. Because I had this flash forward to, you know, not knowing any of these people, going to some place that, and it may be a great place that, you know, does 40 or 50 people. And I was so grateful knowing that I know all these people for the most part. I know they signed up to do this. I'm sharing this space, you know, with them. I'm so proud of them doing it. And I knew that they were all there for the right reason. And
Yes.
that to me was like super reassuring also because
Well,
of exactly what you said.
yeah. And this weird thing happens, right? Like you may have been like cool with those people, like, like, yeah, like we do business together. But after that one night, you guys, that's like such an inexplicable bond that you guys have now, where it's like next time you see those people, it's just, you know, hugs and love and everything. It's just
Yeah. And that
you
was,
suffered, you loved together, you were sad together.
it's a weird mix of emotions, and the timing of it was perfect. The sun started coming up, and you know, people kind of had a little bit more of an earlier experience than I did, so they kind of got up and the sun's coming up and they just kind of went out and sat by the pool. And once I realized I was back in the present space, not the ayahuasca loop or whatever I was in, it was literally like, boom, now you're back. Like you're waiting for the loop to repeat and it didn't, and I realized, oh, the sun's coming up. Like the second the sun came up, it sounds just bizarre, is that I was like, I was back. I was just back in the present. And I remember getting up and going next to them. And I remember hearing everything that they went through. And I just went up and gave them like a big hug. And Jody was still not up yet. So she got up after her, gave her a big hug. And I just sat next to, you know, a friend of ours, and she just put her head on my shoulder. And I was like, oh, it just felt like you were so proud of like all those people for, because I got to see all the shit that they went through. So I just felt like super proud that they, you know, opted to do this. They did the hard thing. You heard all the things, you know, the one girl who they were saying, come back to your body. I asked her, I said, you know, what happened? She's like, I died. I'm like, what? She's like, no, I literally thought I was dead. I was like, oh, and hearing her, I'm like, yeah, I believe you.
Man, I've been through some shit. One of the last times that I drank, I actually went into full anaphylactic shock.
Whoa.
There's a cat in the place where I was drinking, and I saw it earlier in the day, and I was like, "Oh, cute cats! I like cats, but I'm just super allergic to them."
Oh, okay.
And what happened was, after drinking, may have been 2 cups, 3 cups, I don't remember, but I had to start purging. I hugged the bucket
Yeah.
where the cat was around. Next thing
Oh
you know, like
no.
15 minutes later, I'm like, fuck.
Oh no.
So my face is swollen. I look like Will Smith in Hitch. Hands are swollen. The shaman comes over and she just starts doing some crazy shit that I've never seen before. Leaves rattling.
Oh.
And for the first time in my life, it felt like my body was possessed. Like I was like looking at my body from above, like, what the fuck is happening? Like my body was doing its own thing, moving on its own.
Oh, wow.
It was pretty wild.
Oof. And
Every experience is different, man. You don't know what you're going to get.
I know. And that's the weird thing. So we were talking to the guardians the next day and they were nice. And we went up to the house and hung out and got some food. And I asked them, they're like, how you doing? I said, oh, I'm pretty good. And every one of them was like, you drank a lot. And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just here, doing what she recommended. I don't know what a little is. But to your point, I think it's so variable that I'm sure I could easily show up the same place, the same Iowa, the same thing, probably have one glass and just be in God knows where, so
something else I will say, at least in my mind, it makes sense that everyone has a different affinity to like a different plant or medicine.
Oh, sure.
So like weed, 15 milligrams for me, and I'm going to be done for the rest of the night. If someone's smoking weed like down the block and I smell it, I get like contact high, I'm fucked. I'm so sensitive to weed. But mushrooms, I could do a shit ton and have an amazing experience. With ayahuasca, it varies differently. And I find that with certain people, it's just way different.
Yeah.
Whether it's your mescaline derivatives, ibogaine, whatever it may be, it's just, you don't know where you're going. It's just like, all right, this is the one for me.
Yeah, and I asked them about it. I said, does that mean anything? Should I have done anything different? And they're just like, yeah, it just happens to some people. It's your first time, so there's no way to know what like you said, your chemical makeup is, what are your detox pathways, who knows, right? It's just, there's just a lot of variables. And it was definitely something they said they see on occasion. They said it's definitely not the norm, but
yeah,
it happens. I'm like, oh, okay.
How did you like the taste?
It actually wasn't bad.
You're one of those people. I can't.
Yeah, I was one of those. Everyone's like, oh my God, this is going to be like, you're going to be licking dirt. And I was like, that kind of tastes like Jägermeister.
As soon as I smell it, I'm already gagging. Every time I go up to the altar,
really?
I'm just like, or the mesa, whatever they call it.
Yeah.
Whatever they want to call it. Every time I smell it, I'm just like, ugh.
It was thicker than I thought. That's one thing I was kind of surprised at. So
it's interesting because in the Santo Daime Church, they, I do think they use the least amount of additives, but
that's my understanding too.
As far as I know, there's certain practitioners of Santo Daime that actually get up and dance while they're under the influence of Aya. I can't do that. I'm more of an introspective guy. I want to go inside and set myself and, travel off to Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, the guy next to me, after he had his little experience, like he kept getting up and wandering around, out by the pool, kept coming back. It was interesting to see Jody get up and use the bathroom a bunch of times because she was doing it more for gut healing. It was fascinating to see people move so different. Like the one girl who had the big experience, she was, a lot of trapped tension, kind of upper chest breather.
Mm-hmm.
And before she kind of had that breakdown, even after, to watch her get up and go to the bathroom, she moved completely different. No tension in her traps. Like to just be able to witness and to see different things like that. Jody got up and went to the bathroom more times than she remembered. But her head position was much better. It was more back and neutral.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just interesting to see that. And the Guardians all had kind of like a white sort of gown on. And right before I had my fifth glass, I was like, oh, it's like it looks like they were on little conveyor belts moving around, because they all kind of moved very similar and you couldn't see their feet because of, the gown. And it just looked like they were little ghosts that are just kind of just like moving around in the place.
Like Pac-Man.
Yeah.
Did you have your aura ring on while you were?
I did. Yeah.
Did you check the numbers on that night? How you slept?
Yeah. I didn't really sleep at all. I did a little bit towards the morning. HRV was all over the place, right? You could see it was not much, like, completely crazy. Like, when I was having that experience, and nothing was really that out of the ordinary per se. I did have my watch on, but I tried only to look at the time once because I didn't want that to kind of screw with me. And that was like 4:20 in the morning for some reason. It's the only time I remember. Because I had this idea that if I kept looking at the time, I would feel like I was stuck in the. A buddy of mine called it, "Oh, you were stuck in the eternal now." I'm like, eternal now? I didn't even know there's like a name for this stuff.
Well, you were stuck in it anyway on the beach, apparently.
Right. So I tried not to look at it. In hindsight, I probably would not even have brought my watch. I just didn't
Yeah.
think about it, you know. But it was so dark in there, I just turned it off and just didn't really look at it. And then the other part that was interesting was you talked about singing. They had very interesting music, just a super wide, eclectic mix. And at one point, they played a mix of Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen, but it was a female singer. And this is probably right after I had my fourth glass. I remember lying there. I'm like, oh, I love this song. This is like one of my favorites. And you know, I have that idea where you're kind of singing along to it, but you think that you're kind of lip syncing to it. And the next day, they're like, "Who is the guy singing during the night?" And all the guardians are like, "No, none of us were singing." And there was a male voice, and it was amazing. And I'm like, "Oh, I remember like kind of following along to the song." And the other guy next to me, he was out cold. It turns out it was me.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You're a singer.
So
Look at that.
I was like, "Oh, weird." And so you have these things that stick in your head of like, "Oh, maybe I should try singing again." I don't know, but it's like, it kind of freaks me out. And it so happened we got an email the other day. A band we got engaged to, Project 86, they're having their final album. And so you got to bid on some stuff as a fundraiser for their record.
Mm-hmm.
So Jody and I are doing a date with the band on one of their tours.
Oh, cool. That's
and
awesome.
part of it is we get to sing a song with them on stage, which absolutely terrifies me. But after all those things kind of lined up, I'm like, well, I can't like not do that, you know, just because of the significance and how it turned out and the timing and everything else. So it's just interesting how, you know, you're maybe more aware of certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And the other really weird one was, so I made a bunch of notes on, you know, like takeaways, things like that. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, work on being more present, you know, do some more meditation. And the next day I went back and looked at my notebook and I forgot I had written this note down. And I put, listen to Mastodon later albums. I'm like, what? Like, what? Where is this from? This makes no sense whatsoever.
Dark Mike was like screaming from the abyss. He's like, hey, brother, listen to that. Dark
right.
Dude.
And I'm like, okay. I'm like, you know, I had liked their stuff before. The first album, the second album I thought was really good, Crack the Sky. After that, I'm like, I don't know. I just can't get into their stuff. I'm like, whatever. You know, it's a song. I kind of like their tunes. I'll put them on. Like, ever since that experience, like, I'm convinced now they're like the best band on the face of the planet. Like, all of their later stuff I've like listened to on repeat, like ad nauseum. One of their songs like literally almost makes me cry every time I hear it again.
That's funny.
And none of their music was played during the ceremony. Like, there was nothing about it at all, but it's almost like you're listening to it like you've never heard it before. And you're like, I knew they had 3 vocalists, but I never heard like the harmonies like this and the time change. It was, even now, it still just trips me out.
The appreciation for sound post like a very impactful ceremony is insane.
It's crazy.
So in a few ceremonies I've had, I mean, I want to say the privilege, but like after the ceremonies have been closed and I still have that, you know, you're still loopy sort of in that space.
Yeah.
There's some part of you left there. I'll pop on some headphones and I'll listen to some like neoclassical stuff and I'll just start fucking sobbing, man.
Yeah.
Like horizontal tears coming out just because sound is just so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. And they gave us part of the soundtrack that they used, which was kind of cool. And I haven't been able to listen to it yet. Like, I'm sure I will, you know, but because it's just, I've been saving it for if I get to a point where I'm kind of forgetting about the experience and I feel like I'm not living the lessons that I learned from it, then I'll go back and listen to it because I know it's going to put me right back to where I was. So
I'll remind you, don't worry.
Yeah. I appreciate that.
That's so cool, man. It's awesome. You know, I keep running into people that, for the most part, everyone that I've met that has done ayahuasca have been just awesome people. And now that more people in my circle are doing it, and they're like, Marcos, oh my God, I did it. Like, it's it just makes me happy, you know.
Yeah, and thank you for letting me share it with you and stuff too. It's
That's
it's
awesome.
kind of nice, and everybody there to have like we had the whole next day off, so we just got to sit around, talk about our experiences. We went and hung out at the beach. We had probably another day and a half before we left, which to me was just perfect. You know, we're hanging out in Costa Rica. It's a beautiful place. And some of the people who didn't do the ceremony this year did it the year before. So it was super helpful to just share the experience with people that you knew understood what was going on, and like kind of what you observed and what they went through and their experience and what you noticed. And I mean, that was like really interesting. And we met another guy who was there. He was there. No, he wasn't doing ayahuasca. He was doing oh, I'm blanking. Ibogaine or Iboga, which that scares the shit out of me. But
That's
yeah,
the
he was there, and we're asking him about it. He's like, "Oh, you've done it a bunch of times. This is before the ceremony." He's like, "Yeah," and he's like, "But I don't talk about it." I'm like, "You don't talk about it?" I was like, "No." I said, "Do you talk about it with your wife at all when you go back?" He's like, "No, I don't talk about it with anyone." And I said, well, why not? He's like, "Well, I think it diminishes its value." And I'm like, maybe, who knows? I mean, each to their own. But at least to all of us, we thought it was super nice to be able to share what everybody wanted. It wasn't required. And to be with people who had a similar experience that year or the year before,
Mhm.
and just to kind of pull different things out. And even just talking to those people, 6 months later, you still pull stuff out. You're like, oh, yeah, that thing. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, that's gonna happen.
Um,
Yeah, where you'll be listening to a song, a podcast, or something, or just one of those like moments of just like, oh shit, I totally forgot that I saw this in a vision or something.
yeah.
Um, that being said, I do think that sharing circle satsangs or whatever you want to call them are super important, especially for first timers.
Yeah.
I think it normalizes the experience. Sometimes
Yes.
you go through things on your own and you're like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
I'm going crazy. And then you hear everyone and you're like, wait, this guy saw the same thing I did. So did she. And oh, okay, it's cool. To me, that's one of the most integral parts of the whole ceremony. And that starts now your integration process, because you just have a
Yeah.
different appreciation and respect for everyone that went through something similar like you.
Yeah. And it's
Which
trippy that people had similar experiences, right? So I talked to my buddy Rick. I was telling him what happened. He goes, "Oh, yeah, you were stuck in the eternal now." I'm like, "This is a thing? Like, you know about this?" And so we had like a hour-long conversation about it. I was like,
Mhm.
I didn't even know that was a thing. It's like, "Oh, yeah, it happens a lot." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
Just the loop, the Ouroboros, the cosmic serpent just keeps going, keep going.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
um, the Native Americans with peyote, especially the Navajo, it's super disrespectful to ask them about their ceremonies.
That's what I've heard. Like they don't want to share anything about it. The response I heard was, "Well, it was for us. You weren't there. Go fuck yourself," so to speak. They didn't say it in that language, but it's a
It's a
very
very
personal
personal
thing.
experience, meaning that you're in there fighting your demons, and that's like your own battle. You don't have to like talk about it.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, I'm looking forward to trying that myself someday if it ever happens. But
yeah. Have you done mescaline?
I've done San Pedro, which
Okay,
is
so yeah,
cousin. It's Wachuma. That one's beautiful, man. San Pedro is like super pleasant. It's if I were to describe it, like your best high, your best tipsy with a little bit of Molly, and like your best like mushroom. It's like very, very heart centric. Um, the first time I did it, we did a crazy amount, um, which was way different than all the other times I've done it. And I felt like, remember the movie Avatar when like the whole world is just like pulsing together?
yeah,
That's what it felt like. It felt like the earth and the sky were connected and everything is just like talking to you. This like very like throbby energy, and it's overwhelming, but more in a happier way rather than like a just shock and awe where you're just like, what just happened?
yeah.
Um, very pleasant, I think.
Yeah, a buddy of mine, he's still down in Peru. I think that's the main one he's studying to use. He's been down there for a couple of years now. So
Oh, cool. Well, in Peru,
yeah.
like off the side of the road, you're just like, I'll be right back. Excuse me.
Yeah.
Ah, got it.
Yeah. Have you done Ibogaine or Iboga?
No, uh, that one, that one gets tricky. So
Yeah.
Hamilton Morris just went recently to Gabon to do it.
I saw that episode. If people aren't familiar, watch Hamilton Morris's
He's the man.
Pharmacopoeia.
He's
Love that show. So good.
so him and my mentor are friends, and they
Oh,
spoke
okay.
about
Cool.
it, and it's yeah, I don't know if I need it at this point in my
Yeah.
life. It's one of those that's, again, it's, I think it should be reserved for people who really are looking for healing.
Yeah.
I don't know if I want to suffer that much.
Yeah. Because it's long acting too. And there's
It's
potentially
long.
some cardiac toxicity
Well,
potentially
right. So now when you do it in Mexico or in Canada, you got to be strapped to, like, all
monitored.
the hard stuff. There has to
Yeah.
be, nurses in there and doctors and whatnot. I think it's usually like two nurses and a doctor because it's very, very powerful.
Yeah.
I like how Marvel movies sort of have a little bit of like psychedelic innuendo
Yes.
in there. And in
Yeah.
Black Panther, I'm thinking, I don't know, but I'm thinking they're trying to equate that to like Ibogaine and Gabon, right?
Mm,
It's like you drink it, you die. It's a very masculine voice that you hear,
sure.
the narrator in your head, which could be God, your higher consciousness, the plant. Nobody knows really. It's open to interpretation. And yeah, then you're like, you get to see your ancestors and everything you've done before, which is what I heard is very similar to Ibogaine. So maybe someday, but
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, and it's great that they're doing a lot more research on all these compounds now. I mean, obviously, MAPS is looking at psilocybin for different indications. MDMA will hopefully be approved for PTSD. They just had a really good study in Nature Science that came out in May. That was pretty phenomenal. So, still a long ways to go, and it's probably kind of long overdue. But kind of back to what we talked about earlier, my fear with all of that is that, especially as you're treating intractable PTSD with people that have a risk of suicide, that population, by definition, someone unfortunately is probably going to take their life. And if they're doing it on a particular compound, it may give sort of a black eye to potential everything, or I just get worried about something going sideways and it showing up in the media and causing a halt to all of the progress. And just having done just ayahuasca just the one time, man, there is a lot of stuff that could go wrong, so to speak, too. So I don't think it's anything people should tread lightly, do your homework, and make sure you know what you're getting into.
yeah. And when doing your homework, like for me, I thought this was going to be a magic bullet. It's not. It's
No.
part of a journey. It's a very strong suggestive. So depending on your state of mind, this could definitely help push you for better, or it could lead you to ruin and despair. And I've seen
Yeah.
that happen for people that, why isn't this helping me? Oh my God, I expected so much out of this. Oh my God, I'm just like the worst human. And it just spirals into a pretty black hole. Do your research, all the plants are very different. You're gonna get different things out of them. Vet your medicine workers, shamans, or whatever. And if they don't vet you, that's a problem. It should be a very
Yes.
extensive, reciprocal kind of vetting process. And ask all the questions you can. Also, I think as best as you can, try to follow the diet. So you had mentioned something earlier that I wanted to talk about as well. In Peru, what they do is they don't add, well, they do add maybe a little bit of tobacco to certain ayahuascas, or they'll give you mapacho, which is wild Peruvian tobacco. What they do is they make you drink a shit ton of it, followed by 3 liters of water on all fours to purge.
Oh, gotcha.
Westerners, to them, we have a whole bunch of toxins and energies and whatnot that we have to expel out of our body. Which then it's easier for the Aya to like take root, literally or figuratively, in your body and start to work. So I think the diet, the cleaner your body is, the more that it may help. At least I think so.
Yeah.
So
that was kind of the reason they said doing Kambo first, is that it cleans you out, makes you more receptive to it. Most of
Sounds
the
like you got the
people,
triple threat, man. That's so cool.
yeah,
Man.
most people did purge during that. And we had one person who, was set to go through the ceremony, and he just wasn't, a good fit for reasons we'll leave out of the conversation, and he was fine with it. So I agree with you that it should be definitely a two-way street too.
But yeah,
Cool, man. Well, thank you so much for chatting about this. I really appreciate it. Thank you for all your support and everything, and thank you for being so willing to share your experiences too. This has been great.
Too. I'm so glad you're on this side now. Welcome to the team.
Yeah, it's been interesting. It's like you never know where you'll end up, or what you'll end up doing, but it's been good. And Jody says to say hi too. So
hi, Jody. What's up?
She said hello. Cool, man. Well, thank you so much, and I'll do a better job keeping in touch with you too. So
yeah, man, I'm looking forward to hearing more stories and more journeys.
Cool. See you, man. Have a good night. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate it. On this one especially, I would love any feedback, pro, con, indifferent. I know it was off topic here, but like I said in the intro, my goal is to hopefully try to stir just more intelligent conversations around these. Hopefully they will be legal-ish or more legal in the U.S. Coming up. My fear is that the culture and sort of the container and everything else that goes into it may be lacking behind. So if we can start having some of these conversations earlier, I think that will help facilitate everything else that goes into it. As I said in the beginning, this is not to be seen as endorsement of something you should do. Proceed with extreme caution. Do your homework. It's not something I would cavalierly recommend to anyone. And in the U.S., these are still currently Scheduled 1 substances, at least ayahuasca is, which does make it illegal. There are also other concerns related to conservation of resources. So I'll put another link to a great article on that. But any feedback, I would really appreciate it. You can find a way to reach me, I'm sure, or put notes below this episode. Subscribe on your favorite podcast listening area. Huge thanks to my buddy Marcos for having this conversation with me. I really appreciate it. He was one of the first people after Mike Bledsoe I had talked to about this, and he was always very supportive in a very rash and intelligent manner. He was not like, yeah, you got to go out and do this right away. But he was just explaining how it was beneficial for him, and was very encouraging for me to look into it further. So thank you all very much for listening to this podcast and allowing me to share this episode. Any and all feedback is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. We will talk to you all next week.